Hello again. Today we have mild thin package. I'm not sure what's in it. I got so many packages mailed into me that we'll see what's inside. Return envelope, very good. And what we have here. Pretty well packed in double envelope. Okay. So this one is a remote control. I may see what's in the next package. This is the remote control which has been sent to me. Put it in its box. We have two more packages which are new. Arrived yesterday. Didn't have time to open them yet. This one is well packed as well. What's in it? Has return envelope included, that's very good. Has the forms, has the quick installation guide, solar pump controller. Okay. There are two boards inside. Well, actually, including the tiny board in a covering box, which is for displays. It just consists of LEDs, nothing more. So that's okay. Trying to remove the clear tape from it. Somebody put the clear tape on it, which is not the best idea because while removing it may rip the front cover. Right, so what we have here? Here we have two boards. They look identical, so we have two boards which both are not working. Okay. They are two identical boards. Of the solar pump controllers. Actually, the capacitor, or two capacitors, electrolytic capacitors on one, look very, very strange. They've been subjected to some mechanical damage. I'll try to show you. Perhaps too much glare. You see, they've been smacked with something. All right, I'll investigate that later. We are going to open the next package. This is some sort of liquid inside here, the same as on the boards. Doesn't look promising. It's sort of oily liquid. I don't know if it is just the electrolyte from the smashed capacitors. It doesn't smell like anything. I'm not sure what it is actually. Never mind. That we will investigate later. Put it in its own box. For now, I use this kind of plastic box for clients' devices. They usually cover them very well. Okay, and the next one. The next one came in a padded envelope. Came from Early Beach, which is up north in Queensland. Up north from me anyway. It also includes envelope, return envelope. It includes the signed paperwork. Right, replacement of 6 LEDs. They're supposed to be supplied by the client. We'll see what's inside. Nice bubble wrap bag. Goes to the box. Padding. Right, so they are supplied new LEDs to be replaced. I mean to replace the existing one on the board. They are true hole jobs. So no SMD work for this one. Okay. Oh yes. I don't know what happened to the original ones, but you can see that they are well cooked, each one of them. Blimey. Right. Interesting. Okay, so I'll attack this job because it is nice and simple. Right. They are pretty well cooked, if you ask me. probably unforgiving sun in this part of the world. That would be my guess. Some switches. Again, this... No, maybe not. Maybe they're just so shiny. I thought that they may be just some, again, oily residue on them. Alright, so I'm starting my desoldering tool. And we'll start replacing them. Okie dokie. Now, I don't know if there are any if they are directional. Yes. Alright, very good. They have on one side one leg or one pin less. That is easy to distinguish which way they go. And yes, as you can see, they go this way, so this pin is missing on them. Very good, easy to follow. Right. So we'll try to remove this one. Okay. That looks like it is going to be the most straightforward job I had in a long time. And I don't expect any hiccups. Okay, they look all soldered. Try to push them out. Oh yeah, easy. Okay. This one is out. How that looks on the other side. Pretty okay. No problems here. Right, so we'll unsolder the other one. So as you can see, what I'm doing, the technique I'm using is that I come and then wait for the solder to melt. Then I'm trying not to scratch on the board, but lifting that ever so slightly. I'm trying to suck all the solder from around the pin. Wait for it to melt, lift it ever so slightly, and wiggle the pin to make sure that all the solder from around is sucked. Now you have to be a little bit careful not to scratch with your solder sucker the board, because sometimes the pads will be lifted. It just takes tiny of experience to be able to lift back the soldering tool ever so slightly from the face of the board after you melt the solder. I just move it and then wiggle the pin. Okay, that all seems to be done. That's it. What happens on this side? Nothing spectacular, everything looks clean. That's fine. Let's move on to the next one. And it's pretty okay too. It's covered again by some residue of something a little bit oily. I'll clean it. Now there are some here, so it is this residue. As you can see, it is taken out easily. I'll check all the switches as well, as I always do. And since there is many switches here, this LED was not asked for to be replaced, and it seems to be okay. Of course, the usual very dirty board from the manufacturer. They never bother to clean the flux from the board. However, I do clean the flux. My boards are usually left extremely clean. So yes, I will clean their mess in the end. But what I'm saying is, I'm not going to clean the board submerging that in alcohol or anything because of the switches. What happens with the switches is, if any dirt diluted, let's say flux diluted by alcohol, penetrates to inside of the switches and then the alcohol dries out, that residue of flux may dry out and solidify on the contacts, preventing them from switching properly or contacting properly. So you have to be very careful when you're cleaning the boards the boards that contain switches, knobs, the potentiometers and things like that, deep switches. Usually connectors like that are not affected, but even the trim pot like that, although it is not supposed to be changed because it was the factory set, but still you don't want for the cleaning solvent, whatever you use, let's say an alcohol, including all the diluted rubbish, go into it, because like I said, after the solvent evaporates and dries out, those previously diluted particles of dirt, flux, and what have you, they may block it. They may actually prevent that device working properly. Okay, but I still have to clean it. So on this side it was soldered. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to still clean those vias a little bit. Just to remove the old solder. I don't know if that board is from the era of lead-free solder. Can't see any mark on the board specifying that was lead-free. Not that, I mean, maybe it was, but I didn't notice it. Made in Japan. Tadano. Well, it doesn't specify, it doesn't show lead-free symbol on it. So maybe it is the board from the time where they weren't so silly as to use lead-free solder. I'm absolutely against lead-free solder for several reasons. It's much harder to work with. It has about 20 degrees higher melting temperature. It is harder, physically harder than leaded solder, more brittle, so more prone to cracking. Creating dry joints, cold joints, depending which nomenclature you want to use. Now, I can't see any lead-free symbol on it, so possibly it is still leaded solder they used. Nevertheless, I'm going to clean it using the braid wick. I'm using the pretty beefy soldering iron tip for it, but it is flat at the end, so I like it because it just cleans that pretty well. Okay, that's clean. Not that it differs too much from the other one, but just to satisfy my habits of cleaning the boards. Okay, that's done. Next one. Put on the wick a little bit of RA flux. It helps enormously to remove all unwanted solder from the holes. trying to be as gentle as possible as not to rip those vias. Just sliding over them without pressing too hard, trying to let the heat do its work. Yes, perhaps I should cut the wick already. It has accumulated a little bit of solder on it, but it still has some capacity. So. Now, while it is not a big problem, you can always resolder that. I try to avoid touching with the wick those pads which are finished already. There's no need to redo it if they are good. I mean, like I say, it's not the end of the world if you by mistake touch it and suck all the solder from them. You can always resolder that. But, well, I mean, if you do that, try to resolder it immediately, otherwise you may forget it. As it happened often to me. Okay, we got this one on to do. A bit more flux. What happened to my flux? Somebody stole my flux. No, they didn't. They didn't put it in its place, that's all. Okay, so this is done, this is done, this is done. 1, 2, 3, 4, I think all of them are done. Yes, looks like all of them are done. Okay. Clean it. I'll use the cotton swab, a little bit of alcohol, just to remove the bulk of the flux. Then I'll clean it with the brush. There's no point of smearing all that flux all over the board. So I want to remove the majority of it with the swab, or Q-tip as some people like to call it. And then taking care only of the residue after. Now that old flux will need to be diluted pretty well, so those are spray some alcohol on it, let it sit for a while, and then make it work. On this side there are no potentiometers or switches, so I'm pretty safe doing it. The other side is different story though. I mean, again, I don't want to put so much alcohol on the board as to let it seep to the other side and then affect the switches or potentiometers. Okay, so the old flux seems to be diluting very well. Cleaning very well. Okay, I think I'll switch now to the brush. Okay, so this is board from printer, OKI. Often I don't have an idea on the board from what I'm working on. People just send me the board, and I have no idea what device that comes from. To me it is irrelevant really. The board is the board. I mean, yes, if I have to diagnose what's wrong with the board, I need to know what voltage comes to the board, and ideally would have to know where it comes to the board. Sometimes you have many connectors which are identical all over the board, and you can't distinguish between them just by looking on them, because some of them are outputs, some of them are inputs of different voltages to the same board at the same time, coming from different board, like from power board. So sometimes it's hard if I have no knowledge of what voltages come and where to the board. I have to make the educated guess, and if I have no way of finding it out through documentation, online search from the client or whatever, then I have to use trial and error method, starting with very small voltages, like 3 volts, and see what happens here and there, or 1.5 volt, see what happens. If nothing happens, and there is no visible short on the board anywhere, like I'm talking visible in the sense that my desktop power supply or benchtop power supply doesn't report big current consumption on the board. So I try the next voltage and see what happens. Like start with 1.5, say, if the board consists of many logical level components, so obviously they would be very delicate, and 1.5 volt shouldn't damage them. Check all the ICs if they report any output. If nothing happens, nothing is found, I check all the similar connections with the same voltage. If nothing can be established from that, I increase the voltage and start all over again. Say from 1.5 volts to 3 volts and start all over again. Until I find some response to the board. Obviously, if the mains power is not supplied to the board in question, it must be coming from the separate power board. And if I don't have access to the power board, wasn't sent to me, for instance, because it was deemed to be operational with no problems, and I have only access to the board under the repair, so I have to assume that from the power board the supply current comes somewhere onto the board under repair, and try to find where it is and what voltage it is. That is, like I mentioned, only in a situation when I don't have this information beforehand. Yes, it is a long and painful process, because I found sometimes the board have 8, even up to 12 connectors on them. They all look identical. Yes, you can think of analyzing the traces coming from them. Usually supply traces are larger than just logic traces. But sometimes it is not enough, because sometimes all the traces are identical. So therefore you have to just look and try to chase through the rabbit hole. And nowadays, of course, the schematics are absolutely top secret. You can't get them anywhere, unless somebody decides to, well, borrow them, put it that way, from the manufacturer and make accessible online or something, which is very rare, very rare, especially for the commercial boards, not like laptops or mobile phones or consumer electronics, very popular consumer electronics. Yes, you can get the boards every now and then, but for commercial products it's also almost impossible to get the schematics. So you have to learn to work without and reverse engineer often the intent of the designer. Okay, this part of the board looks relatively clean to me. It's a little bit of gunk still around this chip. That is all good and not sticky at all, so it is all clean. So, okay, we'll do this bit now. What I'm using is just a paper towel to dry the board and actually absorb quite a lot of dirt from it onto the paper. You can see it is pretty well discolored. So quite a lot of that dirt transfers to the paper when I brush through it. Drying it at the same time. Now, to get the gunk from underneath the chips, what I usually do, I put a lot of alcohol and then using the air try to blow it. I found that having the air compressor is absolutely essential for this kind of work. I'm just remotely switching them on since they are pretty noisy and I keep them in the shed outside. I have two compressors ganked up into one unit, so they complement each other and then they feed to the single line. That lets me to utilize just normal cheap two compressors and obtain the pressure up to 100 psi from them. Yeah, it's coming towards 100 right now. One already cut off, it's full, and the other one, the bigger one, I got one smaller and one bigger, still pumping. That goes to about 105 psi right now. That's more than enough for me. Now, since I work in a residential area, work from home obviously, so I don't want those compressors to kick in during the night. That's why I turn them off. Yes, I try to make it as leak-proof as possible, the line, but the line is pretty long and it has many connections in it. And I can't find, using even the soapy water and all this, I can't find the micro leak somewhere. So yes, eventually they will lose their air and then they occasionally kick in during the night. So that's why I turn them off. For many years I have absolutely leak-proof connection. My compressors were never turned off for months at the time, and they would only kick in when I was using them. However, they developed a micro leak. So rather than try to investigate and repair that micro leak, I simply turn them off at night. doing it for a while, not yet, but I think it is much cleaner than it was. It came from the factory anyway, so I think it's clean enough. Okay, so this part of the board looks very clean. As you can see. This is clean part of the board, and this is not cleaned yet part of the board. So you'll notice the difference, perhaps. This one is pristine now, and this one has still some gunk in it. I like clean boards. It's so much easier to find any faults on them. And when you leave the flux on the board, well, directly, yes, it doesn't affect the board. It's not corrosive or anything. Some people say that it does even protect from moisture. Well, yes and no. If it is intact, yes, it doesn't let the moisture through. However, when it dries out, it solidifies and it cracks. So, through the cracks, the moisture can then go through easily, and it's trapped underneath. So it's actually counterproductive, because if the moisture goes through the cracks under the flux, it cannot dry out very easily, and it keeps on corroding whatever is underneath. Now, also, flux is usually sticky, so it attracts dust, which sticks to it easily, and the dust in turn attracts moisture. So for many reasons I prefer my boards to be very, very clean. Not even mentioning that it looks so much better to the client when they have the board back and they can see the difference of how the board looks now after being through my hands. I had comments from many clients that the board looks absolutely fantastic, that it is like brand new, often even better than brand new, because factories or manufacturers in the factories, they don't seem to be bothered paying anybody to clean the board. It takes a little bit more time, and they would have to pay somebody to do it. So they decided, nah, that's not important. Well, I'm a big believer in the workmanship, good workmanship. So, okay, that board on this side is clean as it's going to be. I'll clean this workstation here, since it is absolutely a mess. good enough. Right, so install. I will install, or perhaps I should clean this side now, since I have access to it. Yes, I will. Since the other side is already clean, I will try to cover my workstation with the paper towels. So whatever seeps through is actually absorbed by paper towels rather than dirting again the other side. We could play this game of chasing from one side to the other all day long if I didn't do it. Now this one is, like I say, it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 switches plus a trim pot, so I don't want to use excessive amount of alcohol. So what I do, I'll just do only next to it and between. I will not be spraying any alcohol on it. I'll just wet my brush and clean it like that. Now this oily residue which I mentioned at the beginning is a little bit worrying me. That's why I want to clean those boards. I have no idea what this residue is. Well, it is seemed to be covered with some gunk as well. This is just initial wetting of the board with the alcohol. Spreading the alcohol to let it work on the board. Very gently and carefully around those switches. Okay, I don't want that to seep in. Yes, I am insane, but only mildly. And I don't think it is dangerous to the public. Some people say that I'm insane already by wanting to work on that kind of thing. You know, I used to be an architectural designer for almost 30 years, and pretty recognized too. I had my regular clientele, was working mostly for myself, like from home, had my own business. And I was, for many years, actually prized for the quality of my designs and drawings. And then suddenly, about 3 years ago, I felt that I had absolutely enough of doing it. I was sick and tired of designing and drawing houses or buildings. And I decided to change my career. And I seem to find niche here in Australia, because it appears to me, seems to me that I may be the only one in Australia doing that kind of thing. From the number of jobs and origin of jobs sent to me and number of phone calls I have from different places all over Australia, including the other side of the continent. And people say that they can't find anybody else locally to them, so they are willing to mail me their devices or boards and wait for up to 4 months in a queue. That's my working queue right now, because I can only do so much. I have to refuse probably about 70% of all the inquiries because I can't cope with it. I only take things nowadays which I can do very, very quickly. So I try to find anybody I could teach for free, and then let them some of my equipment for free to help them establish their own business, and then give them some of my work so they could start earning money immediately. I would prefer them to be cooperation to me rather than competition, but if they chose to be competitive to me, so be it, I don't care. I would gladly part half of Australia to somebody. I mean, I would gladly part with half of Australia and send it to somebody else, because I hate people I hate not being able to help people, clients, with their problems. Obviously, they don't ring me or contact me because they love me. They contact me because they need help with their electronic devices, which is very encouraging, because with this throwaway society and the manufacturers doing everything what they can nowadays to make sure that their devices are not repairable, it is very encouraging that people still care about environment, and they would rather spend the same amount of money on repairing their old stuff than buying the new one. I mean, if the new one is cheaper than the repair, of course, most of them would then opt for buying the new one. But often, like with this board, for instance, or many other boards I have, especially from the commercial part of the market, there are no replacements. The boards don't exist anymore. Manufacturers often don't exist anymore. The distributors, those firms don't exist anymore. They've been bought out by somebody else who decided to drop this particular line of production or this model altogether several years ago, and the boards are not available anymore. I got many clients from air conditioning industry, which actually they come with the board. They say that this board is not available for replacement anymore, and the only option is to replace the whole ducted air conditioning system throughout the whole house or building, which costs a few $1,000s, just because the board is not working. Control board is not working. So obviously, in such a case, it is much more viable, economically viable and sensible to repair the board if possible, than to replace the whole otherwise good system and working system. So that's my clientele, mostly, commercial clients. I got occasional private clients, yes, with their headphones, remote controls, treadmill boards. I got quite a few of them. And so on and so forth. So yes, and you know, coming back to the thing I was saying, I put that advertisement on the web, on my website there is. Also I put it in Australia. We have something like Gumtree, which is the marketplace sort of where people advertise for sale their businesses, their things, their goods, and also the jobs. You know, if they look for a job or they have some vacancy and they look for a worker, they also advertise that. So I put this advertisement saying precisely that I have half of Australia to part with, to somebody willing to learn. No prior knowledge is required. The only prerequisite is that they are serious about it and they really want to learn. And also another thing, I can't lend them my microscope because I got the only one. But most of the other necessary and required equipment like soldering irons, even hot air stations, multimeters and what have you, I can lend them for free until they can buy their own. And I can point them in the right direction if they do want to buy their own. So they don't have to do it hard way like I did. So apart from teaching them for free whatever I know and lending them most of required equipment so they don't have to fork out their money from the start, helping them setting up their own business, and giving them some of my work which I can cope with, and then happily sending those inquiries which I can't fulfill over to them. I mean, how many times in your lifetime situation or opportunity like that goes your way? You would think I would be swamped with the phone calls. I had only one so far. Well, actually two. One was just by the way, the lady rang me to ask for if I could help her with her device, and I explained why I couldn't, that I have no time for it and what have you. And then I told her this story that I'm happy to teach somebody, but there is nobody wanting to learn. And then she said, oh, I would be. I'm very technically minded. I have no problem changing my career. I would love to do those things. I said, well, yeah, just come in anytime you want. And she's local. And that was the last I heard from her. It was about 2 weeks ago. And then she didn't even ring, nothing. Didn't say, oh, sorry, I changed my mind. No, nothing whatsoever. And the other person actually rang me particularly about that, so I still have to see him. I still haven't seen him in person. He's supposed to come next week to see. I like from the conversation what he was telling me. That's exactly the kind of person I would be looking for. But, you know, after that, I mean, I was expecting hundreds of phone calls about it. This is a brilliant opportunity for some young person wanting to establish themselves in a... Many young people don't know what to do with them, you know. They can't think of anything useful doing anything useful, and then suddenly somebody gives them the idea on a plate and offers to help them to fulfill it. Nope. Not even a half a phone call apart from those two which I spoke just before. No interested people. Well, the perception of people is very funny. I have friends, very good, my friends, and actually, I mean, for different reasons, not for this particular what I'm going to talk about, but even they say that they are against me doing that thing. They see that there is no future in it, that they tell me there is no money in it, there is no potential in it, that people don't want to fix their stuff, they would rather buy the new one, I absolutely don't agree with it. So when I happen every now and then to talk to them about this, they actually are against me, and then they say, nah, that's rubbish, that's waste of time, to the point that the man was out of work for a while, and I wanted to help him the same way as I just spoke earlier about advertising. And I said, well, look, you are a pretty technical person, you are pretty technically minded, you like fixing stuff, why don't you try to do that? Oh, I don't know anything about it. I said, well, I didn't know anything about it when I started. I watched many hundreds of videos on YouTube, and then I learned how to do it. To be honest, I started from very beginning, from very base. What is a current, and what is the difference between AC and DC current? I don't know. So now I understand why he didn't want to do it, because they are not convinced that there is the future in it. Well, I can live from it, support myself somehow on it. Perhaps I'm not a millionaire, that's alright, but only because I'm too particular. I can't work all the time on it because I'm semi-retired. My health problems don't let me to work constantly on the boards, but if I was any younger and could devote as much time as it's needed to fixing all the inquiries, all the jobs coming through the inquiries, I would be pretty good. I would be more than able to support myself. My only limitation is my health problems and age. Okay, so the board is clean. So now I can start installing those LED displays. First one, missing leg is on this side, so it goes this way, like so, very easy. I don't know how far it should be from actually the board. I'll say it that way. Flux. Okay, tack it here and on diagonal so it is held in place, and simply go and solder the pins. Oops. Got a little bridge that's easily fixed. It is not straight, it's not parallel to the board. So that's what I'll do. I'll just simply clean the flux very quickly and desolder this bit, this side. I want to clean the flux before desoldering so it doesn't clog my desoldering tool. Use 2 of those, it should be fine. Okay, that's all right. Yes, I'll use like that. I think that will be all right. Okay. Okay, a little bit of flux. Tuck it on in the corners. So that doesn't move. Check again. In fact, it's much better than the first one, so I think I will redo the first one afterwards anyway too. Oh well. Didn't think of it with the first one to use the little spacer underneath. But it doesn't mean that I have to stick with what I had. I'm free to redo it. And I will. Okay. Next one. pin is slightly bent. Straighten it. Okay, that's better. May as well put the second one in. And okay, and last one. Sorry, last two. That should be enough. Actually, I'll remove it because I want to clean the solder from the legs here on the other side, otherwise I won't be able to feed it deeper in the so that goes back here to those shims. Again, just trying to remove the excess of flux before using brush. I don't want for the flux to be smeared all over the board with the brush, so I want to remove as much of it as possible and then clean the residue after. So now I'll just use my soft brush to clean the residue from it. Go between those pins. Using the same brush, I do the exactly same thing through the paper towel, so I can lift up with the paper towel as much dirt as possible. Okay, that looks already much cleaner. That's not the last step of cleaning the board, absolutely not. But this is removing the majority of it. If it is too dry, just wet it. And then lift it with the towel. So now coming with the I think it is clean. So the only thing I'm going to do is just to protect those displays with the masking tape. Okay, I also covered this display, and I decided to cover those contacts here, those connectors, to prevent them not contacting after spraying, just in case. That's it. Like so. Okay, everything is covered what it should be. I'll try not to spray those connectors. Okay, I can go and apply the spray coating. I'm using APL acrylic protective lacquer by Electrolube. It dries pretty quickly. Okay, so sometime later, I had something to eat in the meantime. This is how the sprayed board looks like. Not that you can tell a lot, but it's pretty shiny on both sides. Pretty clean. Okay, I'll remove the masking tape. Some of the LEDs are missing black colors, plastic colors. They are here just to prevent from overshining the other LEDs.